I apologize, my alarm went off and it knocked me off at 17 minutes. So here we go again. So yeah, basically, those types of things are more external. And my sister and I would also experience kind of seeing dashes, shadows. I would see like black shadows kind of whip past me in my peripheral view, but can never quite focus. And she would see light ones. I really don't never care what the difference was on that. But those types of external things happen. As far as a demonic possession, and again, demonic possession is not, there's different types. So the demonic possession that I had is where the demon has such hold on, or a right because of a consecration of some sort, a hold on the person's wounds and takes control of their body. Yeah, basically it's your body that is being controlled, not your soul. So there's no demon that can control your will. There's no demon, no demonic possession that can take away your free will and your choice. And so that's not to say that somebody who's demonically possessed can act out on their choices during a possession. So let's say someone in a demonically possessed state, I'll just, for example, me in the past. There was a public incident after Ichnara was removed, and when the diocese was doing their investigation and kind of lollygagging about it. And it was a specific set of circumstances where I and the other woman in town that Ichnara had been abusing, but their situation was kind of different. And then some of the people from the parish there had gone into the Adoration Chapel at St. John's and asked, I was actually alone in the Adoration Chapel. I mean, there were other people there, a couple other people there, but I was in the back pew and I had just gone to do adoration. I love to do adoration. I found it peaceful and calm and quiet in there, and so I would go there all the time. And I was having a lot of struggles at the time, and on my way out of the chapel, I ran into a man and a woman from St. John's that were involved, along with this other woman, and they were all coming in. And they said hi, and then they kind of stopped me on my way out and said, do you want to pray a rosary with us? And, you know, I kind of reluctantly agreed. And we didn't go into the actual chapel fully. It was like an entryway, so it was inside, but there were kind of glass doors and windows between us and the people that were in the pews where they were worshiping the sun monstrance god. And so we began this repetitious, blasphemous Queen of Heaven invocation called the Rosary. And it was on like the third decade in, and I think this was right before Christmas. Technically, her and I, instantaneously, I had actually lost control, but I was standing stiff against a wall, so I realized I'd lost control, like motor skills of moving my arms or legs, and I was pretty scared. But I couldn't say anything. I couldn't control or say my words or ask for help. And I became very frightened because nothing like that had happened, what I felt was about to happen, in front of people in public like that before. It was always a very private thing, for the most part, manifestations. And I remember at some point on the third decade, which is when they celebrate the Christmas, which was actually December 25th originally, was the sun god celebration. And, but that's other videos you can look into on that. We both dropped to the ground at the same time. Apparently I was facing a different direction, they told me later. And then just these major manifestations began. Her demonic spirits came out, mine came out, we're both on the ground. I could hear hers, but I couldn't see her because we were faced in different directions. And hers spoke in kind of like Asian type languages. They sounded like Asian, Chinese, Japanese, stuff like that. Mine, the demons that I was possessed by, generally spoke in Aramaic, Hebrew, German, English, but mostly Aramaic, Hebrew, and German, which none of those I know how to speak. I'm fluent in Italian. And I know a lot of French and Croatian, but no German, and even though in my blood there's German, so they assume that's why. And obviously Hebrew, Aramaic. So it's like they started going back and forth at each other. Her demons and my demons is just this like thing going back and forth, and it was just crazy, guys. It was crazy. I was aware. I don't think she was one that's aware during her stuff, and so I'm just there on the ground. Before I know it, like, I remember the priest there. I remember noticing he was there. I could see his, like, feet because I'm on the ground. And before I knew it, like, there's paramedics and cops there. And they're dragging me, literally dragging me from the chapel. It tried to pull me in towards the monstrance inside. And then realized they weren't, you know, dragged me out for whatever reason and brought her in. And so I got dragged outside onto the concrete steps, and these manifestations were just completely out of control. And apparently, like, these cops and people were just terrified. Everybody knew it wasn't natural. Like, everybody there knew it wasn't natural. They knew what was going on, and there were people that had come around in a circle around me that were down the road on Main Street and other places. And when I started to finally get some control back, there was somebody specifically there that I recognized, and I reached out for her. She was actually the mother of the guy that I was in a relationship with. And I was trying to gain control, and I was asking her for help, and asking her not to let them tie me up or anything like that, because they basically were trying to tie me down to this board, which ended up happening. I couldn't stop it fully, and so they ended up literally strapping me down to this board with like Velcro. Looks like a freaking mummy. It was ridiculous. And then the idiots ended up putting me and her in the same ambulance and taking us over to the hospital. And that was one of the most surreal things ever, because all these people showed up. The priest there showed up at the hospital. The doctors. Everybody was just so confused. Because the two of us, by the time we got to the hospital, were back completely. There was no manifestation happening anymore. And I remember people were just cracking up in there. Like, that was crazy. And then that was actually the night of Eclipse. One of the, Eclipse? Yeah, I think that's what. Yeah, it was an eclipse. And, it was a lunar eclipse. And so I actually ended up getting discharged with hospital papers that actually had diagnosis demonic possession from the actual medical staff. I'm not kidding. I still have it to this day. And so even they knew it wasn't normal. And so when you're dealing with a demonic possession, they look for, at least in the Catholic determinations, they look for, I think it's either 5 or 7 different categories of things. And apparently I had every category. And the ones that I know off the top of my head are knowledge of things that you wouldn't otherwise know. Supernatural knowledge of things. And so I definitely had that. They would say things during exorcisms that I had no idea of, and then they would tell me later. Stuff like, I think there was one where demon was picking at the deacon there who had gotten in a fight with his wife that morning. Of course, I had no idea about that. And mentioning things about that. So stuff like that. Of course, I had premonitions and things like that from the time I was a kid. You know, like I saw my baby sister die before it happened. I saw, you know, my brother get in an accident before it happened. My dog got hit by a car before it happened. And so I did have a lot of premonitions. That's another demonic thing. And there's some people that will try to use that to try and change things. And in reality, that's not what should be done. It should be pretty much ignored and rejected. And that's where people get into soothsaying and predictions and crystal balls and, you know, stuff like that, psychics, and you run into a lot of trouble. You pretty much end up like putty in the devil's hand. And so I try to ignore those things as much as I could. Speaking languages or esoteric languages are others that the person does not know how to speak, so I had that, as I've already mentioned. Supernatural strength. Now, this one I questioned for a long time. They told me I had supernatural strength, but the thing is, because when I was aware during the exorcisms and would feel everything that the demon felt that was surfacing, to me, I never felt like I was stronger than I usually am. I couldn't really perceive it from, you know, where I was at. And so, the one time, though, that it was made clear to me, so I just kind of went with their word on it. Like, yeah, you have supernatural strength. I'm like, okay. I've seen it with other family members growing up. I've seen things. Like, my brother pull a lamppost out of the concrete with one arm in a first try, or my sister, who is super weak, actually kick the windshield from the inside of a van with a tennis shoe and make the whole thing shatter in one kick. Things like that. But I, for myself, was always skeptical that I had that. And I'll never forget, it was one point during an exorcism where things got worse. They had less and less control the further they went, you know. They couldn't control the demons the way that they thought they could. The priest thought they could, because the priest thinks they have authority over the demon. The demon just lets them think they have authority over them. It's a game in the end, guys. It's a game. It's a ritualistic game. So, anyway, this one point, they were trying to keep me on the ground, and I just rose up really, really slowly. Except there were 3 men, 3 full-grown men, and a woman trying to keep me down on the ground on top of me. 3 men and a woman. And I'm on the ground flat, and they're holding me down, and I was able to stand and rise up completely into a solid position and stance, and they could not budge me. And my awareness at that time, realizing that, was like, yeah, this is not, you know, because again, there's awareness, but you have no control. You can't do anything. You know, it's like being in it for a horrifying, terrorizing ride. You know, that you can't get off until it's over, or they decide it's over. And so, those are some examples of things that are real and that do happen in real life. That's not just Hollywood. I have heard stories of, you know, the head turning all the way around, or, you know, the levitations, and I know that those things happen too, but they're much more rare. Apparently those things happen a lot with my uncle, and other things like that, but not to the point where it's magnified in Hollywood movies. You know, the devil does not have the control that Hollywood makes them think they have the control. A lot of it is smoke and mirrors in a lot of ways, and just coming from somebody who went through years of these, the demons are very much like a toddler throwing a tantrum. And yes, they're clever and intelligent, and they play a game, and they kept this one going on for a really, really long time. Kept all of us fooled. Kept me fooled into believing I was supposed to be there. Kept me fooled into believing that this was God's church and these people had the authority. And kept these people believing that as well. And all it did was cause damage. All it did was land me in a very destitute place. A very broken place where I wasn't myself at all. I know there were demons that manifested during exorcisms that came out saying there were spirits of like prostitution when I had never prostituted myself. I was waiting for marriage. Like, I had been sexually abused and raped, yes, but as far as consent or anything like that, I was waiting for marriage. I would never dream in my life of prostituting. Well, when I finally got out of there, and things had gotten so bad, and we were trying in the Charleston diocese, or moving, I'd come to Myrtle Beach. I had had an addiction going on with pills and a struggle with narcotics since I was 17, and do a video on that at some point. But when I got into Myrtle Beach, after everybody had turned away, after I'd gone to Oklahoma, which that's another video, I've mentioned in my videos before that I got into hard street drugs, crack cocaine and heroin, and ended up prostituting in order to support that habit. Those are things that I do not believe would have happened were it not for the demonic possession. They weren't me. They weren't me at all. And I do want to do a video explaining how it happened and